All right, we're live. There we go. So how you doing, fellas?
Good. How you doing?
Doing good.
Good. You guys picked anything up this past week, music wise?
Yeah. Well, I picked up the new Judas Priest,
Mhm.
which is awesome. I also picked up the new Blaze Bailey album. He, of course, sang with Iron Maiden for a couple albums, and I'm a huge Blaze Bailey fan. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I always tell people who are kind of on the fence to listen to his solo albums. And if you like just straight ahead heavy metal, you're gonna love Blaze Bailey. So, and his newest album doesn't disappoint.
Nice.
Good. Hey,
Yeah.
Trevor.
Yeah, I picked up that new Priest too, and I thought it was pretty good. And what I also picked up was that
Oh yeah, the
Mars.
Mick Mars.
Yeah, which,
Nice.
which which was, I mean, it's actually a really solid album. I mean, the in terms of the vocalist that he chose, and I can't remember his exact name. You know, it's a maybe not my absolute favorite choice, but I mean,
Yeah.
Mars is playing and his riffs on that. It's
Yeah.
it's like Mars still has it kind of thing. I mean, very, very awesome.
Is it just one vocalist for the whole album?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. And actually, I'm saying it because I haven't gone through and read anything on it. I just listened to it one time from start to finish and didn't
Right.
actually investigate it yet.
Right.
So I'm assuming from what I remember hearing, I think it's just one vocalist.
I mean, we've had a lot of great hard rock and heavy metal albums coming out. You figure, I mean, we've had new ones from Saxon, new album from Bruce Dickinson, new album from Blaze Bailey, new album from Judas Priest. You just showed the Mick Mars. I know Blue Oyster Cult's going to be coming out with a new one soon. So it's been a lot of hard rock, heavy metal.
Yeah, yeah. And the one nice thing about that Mars, I mean, I guess for 2024, this actually is significant, is only like $25.
Oh wow, okay,
Like it's not one of those $40, single LP type things.
yeah.
So that was,
Now, have either
Really?
of you guys listened to the new Bruce Dickinson album?
I listened to I streamed like 3 or 4 tracks when I was at work last weekend,
Yeah,
and it wasn't the worst thing I've ever heard.
yeah.
I mean, I probably like it maybe a little bit more than the last Maiden album, quite frankly.
Is he trying to stay within his vocal range?
No, he's straining in a lot of the songs.
Mhm.
I mean, I think I agree with you though, Brandon. I think I like it probably. I just ordered the CD. I haven't gotten the CD yet, but I've been streaming some of the songs, and I think I agree with you. I like it better than Senjutsu.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with Senjutsu, and I've said it before, the songs are just too long.
Yeah. Totally.
And I really think Steve Harris, he needs somebody to come in and edit things. I think they need a new producer because they've had Kevin Shirley producing the last, however many albums, and I don't think anybody, especially Kevin Shirley, will stand up to Steve Harris and say, "Hey, Steve, this is a great idea, but can we chop like 3 minutes off the song?"
Mhm.
Like, I love your bass playing, but do we need like the Klansmen every freaking song?
Right.
I don't know. And again, I love Maiden. I love Steve Harris. I think they're such a great band. And I'm so happy that they're making, new music. But
Right.
In the same breath, they need somebody to edit some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you're 100% right, without question.
Well, don't forget Ace Frehley's album too.
Oh yeah,
And,
Ace Frehley.
Mhm.
as well. But we're here tonight to talk about 5 of our favorite genres and the album that introduced us to that particular genre. This was Brandon's idea, and Chris and I both thought it was a great one. So, Brandon, do you want to start off with your first album pick?
Yeah, I'll do that. And I'll start off with the one that actually made me think to even throw this out as an idea. And I'll tell this story really, really quick. It won't take more than 45 seconds or so. I love telling it. I was born in Southern Illinois. and grew up kind of on the wrong side of the tracks in the projects in Southern Illinois, right? So growing up, pretty much what I was exposed to was gospel and R&B. That was what I listened to. In the middle of my 5th grade year, my dad gets a job teaching at Lincoln University, a whole state over in Middle Missouri, and we're on the other side of the tracks now. We're in the suburbs, right? And so I meet these new friends and I get introduced to all of this music, and we get cable for the first time, and the TV is on one day, and I look up and see this face, and I'm just like, holy cow, that guy looks cool as hell. Who is that? And I go over and turn the volume up on the TV, and it was the first video I ever saw on MTV, and it was Eyes Without a Face by Billy Idol.
Nice.
And that was like literally the moment, the video, the song, the whole nine that introduced me to all things pop and new wave, MTV, the whole nine. All came from that one song that one day. And that Christmas, I told my mom the only thing I wanted for Christmas was I want that freaking Billy Idol cassette. Like, that's what I want. And sure as heck, that's what she got me for Christmas. And this is the exact copy I got back in 5th grade.
Nice.
It's been following me around that long. So Eyes Without a Face, Billy Idol's album Rebel Yell, played that to heck, and that was totally my introduction to all things pop and new wave.
Well, and it was nice your mom upgraded your copy to a Japanese press with a cool Obi strip too.
If only. But yeah, I fell so in love with that album. I could not stop playing it for the life of me. And to this day, I can listen to it from start to finish, and it's just like it's as fresh as ever. Yeah, it's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we all came from the MTV generation, so I think for all 3 of us, MTV was a big part, especially if you're into music for your growing up. I remember seeing Def Leppard videos all the time.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think I saw the video for Foolin' and whatever, I can't remember, but it was like I just felt like every hour there was another Def Leppard video on.
Yeah.
Rock of Ages,
Rock of Ages,
Photograph, and all those classic ones. Yeah.
Like I still remember my first 3. Like it was Eyes Without a Face, and the very next video that came on was With or Without You by U2, and right after that it was Hotel California by the Eagles. And
I didn't even know that they had a video for that.
Yeah, it was maybe it was a live thing, because it was live concert footage. It wasn't like a video. Yeah. But I just remember seeing those, and I was just like, what is this stuff? Holy cow. And just glued from that point forward.
Well, then, of course, when Headbangers Ball came on, I remember watching that religiously.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, George, cassettes were the format. My entire collection back then was practically cassettes. I had a few records, but I was totally all in on cassettes. Everything I bought back then, and I've got a lot of cassettes now. That more for nostalgic purposes than anything else. I don't really listen to a whole lot of them, but I just love having that original format. Like you've got there for that one, Brandon.
Yeah, I actually still play quite a few cassettes, and the one thing I've kind of noticed is you get a halfway decent cassette deck. Like, I mean, I have like a Nakamichi LX3, which is still like maybe $150, maybe $200 deck. So it's nothing crazy. It is amazing how great cassettes can sound.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, really, really good.
Oh yeah. Some of the quality on those is as good as any, some of the vinyl presses actually. So yeah. All right, Chris.
Well, tonight I tried to pick some different genres, and I tried to pick some different albums than what I usually show, because I feel like I always show a lot of the same albums. So there'll be some similar groups that I talk about, but I'm trying to show a few different albums. The first genre I'm going to talk about is psychedelic music. And this is going to kind of go along with the next genre I'll talk about too, because when I was listening to it as a kid, I don't think I really realized that the genre was psychedelic. But looking back now, this album definitely played a part in getting my brain and my ears ready for psychedelic music. and I'm going to go with the Monkey's Head. And been a huge Monkees fan. Jeff knows this since I was a kid. And I remember the first time listening to this album, it was so different than their first couple albums, like the debut and More of the Monkees and even Headquarters. Like I said, they were branching out into some psychedelic stuff. Frank Zappa was involved with this soundtrack. Jack Nicholson was involved with this soundtrack. Of course, it's the soundtrack to the movie Head, which is a total psychedelic experience. You've got the Porpoise song on here, which is one of my favorite Monkees tunes. Isn't that written by Carole King? Coffin King?
Yep.
Yeah. And then, of course, Circle Sky, which is like a heavy psych tune by Michael Nesmith. You've got like dialogue from the movie and sound effects mixed into the recording. The cover is the shiny glossiness, so you can actually see your reflection in the cover as you're listening to the music. There is, a whole bunch of different just soundscapes. They do a version of Daddy's Song. I'm trying to remember, who wrote that song again, Jeff?
Harry Nilsson.
Harry Nilsson, yeah. So there's a little bit of everything, but I feel like the main theme of the album is you've just got this psychedelic, psych rock, vibe going through the whole record. And as a little Chris Prophy, I think it definitely made an impression on me.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, the thing is, I bought the album before I actually seen the movie. And so you're listening to all those sound clips and all those bits of dialogue. And you're like, I wish I could see the movie so all of this would make sense, because it's totally sounds so random. And then you watch the movie and you're like, it still doesn't make sense. I have no idea. Like, I think deliberately so. But yeah, that at one time was my favorite Monkees album because there's so much great stuff on there. There's actually two Goffin King, or at least two Carole King compositions with because she also wrote As We Go Along.
Yeah, I love that song.
Yeah, that's another great one. You can imagine her singing that. But yeah, some of my favorite Mickey songs were Carole King compositions, but that's a great soundtrack.
And I also feel like Peter Tork is represented well on here as well.
Yeah. He never had
the song Can You Dig It?
Yep. And Do I Have to Do This All Over Again?
Right. It's just a great record. And thinking of it now, I probably could have shown a Pink Floyd record as well for the whole psychedelic thing, because one of the first Pink Floyd records I heard was it was one of two. It was either More or Obscured by Clouds. And those two albums are psyched out as well. So, but I went with Monkey's Head. So.
Yeah, good choice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the back covers always reminded me of the back cover of Revolver.
Yeah.
It does kind of look like it. Has that feel?
Yeah. All right. Well, my first pick, this was my introduction to what I believe is one of Chris's favorite genres. And I'm not talking about yacht rock. I'm talking about punk rock. And this was an album I bought. I'd never heard it, but I had the magazine. It was one of the thickest issues of Rolling Stone. It was like their top 500 albums. I think it came out in like the 1980s, and this was pretty high up there. And I knew they were a Detroit band, but this was Raw Power by Iggy and the Stooges. This is actually the third album by the Stooges, but the first album where Iggy got top billing. Before that, their first two albums were just the Stooges, self-titled and then Funhouse. But this is just such a raw. You can see the beginnings of punk rock on here. But the interesting story about this one is, the Stooges had broken up and Iggy Pop got signed to Columbia Records to do a solo album. And he was all strung out on heroin, and he recorded the album and then botched the mixing of it. He had like all the vocals on one channel and all the instruments in another because he didn't know what he was doing. And he brought David Bowie in and said, "Hey, will you remix this album? Because I know I kind of fucked it up." And so David Bowie came in and remixed it. And David Bowie admitted he didn't really know what he was doing either. but at least he spent had put a little more thought into it than Iggy Pop did. But yeah, just a great album. And it's not like real hardcore like thrash or anything like that. I mean, it really, if you like for instance, the first song, Search and Destroy, the opening sounds to me a little bit like Street Fighting Man by the Rolling Stones. But you got Gimme Danger on here, which is the record company Columbia wanted a ballad on each side of the record. So the closest thing to a ballad that you get here is Gimme Danger, which is still a pretty, punk sounding song. Then I love one of my favorite titles of all time, Your Pretty Face Is Going to Hell, on here, which is another just fantastic. And it's really great. I mean, yeah, it's punk and it's raw and it's abrasive, but there's also, like, if you like 60s garage rock, you'll really like this one too. So anyway, that's my intro to punk rock.
Yeah, that's a great choice. And I love those early years of punk and metal because it was sort of before people knew it was punk or knew it was metal. So it was like there were no rules. So these bands were just trying out all different stuff. And like I said, they didn't even realize that they were making punk music, but it makes the music exciting and unique.
Yeah, it didn't even have a name back then. It was just rock and roll still, everything under that umbrella.
Yeah, because even then sometimes, like, the whole idea behind punk, when people talk about that, they think it's like it's something that's just so free and all this type of stuff. But like once it became established, there really were kind of actually rules you had to follow to be a punk band. So kind of like before any of those rules existed, it was okay that you can be a little bit classic rock, you can be a little bit metal, you can be a little bit punk, just go with what you feel.
Yeah.
And that stuff was a lot more pure, I think, just like you guys were saying.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's everybody from our generation that went around classifying everything, in the 70s.
Right.
And everything had to have a label. You had all these different types of rock out there, little subdivisions of rock music. But
yeah. All right. So on my next pick, I'm kind of following that exact same story. And this is the thing I think that was so cool about that experience for me is like I was never in a position where I kind of grew up and my dad kind of listened to this and I kind of heard this from my brother and I picked up on something here and there. It was a 100% crash course for me over the course of 5 or 6 months of just diving right into, like I said, the new wave and pop, and then this is going to be on the classic rock side. So what was my introduction to classic rock? It was that same scenario I was just describing, but before I ever saw that video of Billy Idol, which was a few months after we were there, like the second or third day I was there, I met this kid named Matt, became my best friend, and he was like, "Hey, you like music?" "Yeah, I love music," and I named off some stuff. He's like, "I never heard of that. Have you ever heard of like Aerosmith, AC/DC?" And I was like, "A AC what? What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I'll make a tape for you." And so he put together a classic rock tape. And the first 3 songs on there is song number 3 was Over the Hills and Far Away by Led Zeppelin. Song number 2 was One Vision by Queen. But the very first track on that mixtape was Bob O'Reilly by The Who. Nice. So like, that song literally was my first introduction to this is what the classic rock, Zeppelin, blah, 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 and all this stuff is about. And again, it was just one of those things I was just completely blown away by it. I had never really heard any music like this before. Like the energy of it was almost overwhelming. And of course, you go on later to discover the entire album and stuff like that. And song for song, still probably my favorite Who album. But yeah, Bob O'Reilly definitely still holds that place for me. I'll never forget hearing that come to my little boom box for the first time.
And it's got an iconic cover as well.
Yeah.
Well, that album musically was really ahead of its time in terms of the use of synthesizers. I mean, just the opening of Bob O'Reilly, nothing else sounded like that. I mean, you had bands that were kind of meddling with synthesizers and the Moog synthesizer, but that has a, on that track, and then Won't Get Fooled Again. There's a lot of interesting synthesizer work, kind of predates a lot of electronic music and techno stuff that was starting to come out like in the mid 70s with Kraftwerk. But
right. And again, what we were talking about earlier, like you said, like with Can't Get Fooled Again with the synth and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you still had like Pete hitting guitar chords that very much were, this is some of the flavor you're going to get when this punk thing comes. Just big, raw, open chords and that type of thing.
Yeah, I feel like that's as good as it got with the Who, to be honest. And I feel kind of like Townsend sort of after that gave up trying to be innovative, because Quadrophenia, I feel, was, I mean, Quadrophenia is a great album, but it's kind of a step backwards, really. There's nothing very innovative about that album. And then the next album, The Who by Numbers, was even a further step backwards. And then he tried to do, a little bit more synthesizer stuff on Who Are You album. But by then, I mean, a lot of bands were into that kind of thing. So it wasn't really groundbreaking. But for me, that's my favorite album of 1971 and my favorite Who album and one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah.
And one of Aaron's favorite albums too, I know.
Oh yeah, he loves the Who.
Yeah.
Well, he probably already turned off this video because the first, band I showed was the Monkees. So.
Yeah, no, we're like, Aaron's already like, I can't watch this video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my next genre is prog, and again, the kind of similar to my first genre. I don't think I realized when I was listening to this that it was prog as a kid, but obviously it opened up my ears and my mind to what progressive music could be. And I'm going to show a band that, and I don't want the prog community to get their panties in a bunch. They might say, "Oh, that's not progressive rock. They're not a prog band." Yes, they are a prog band. And I'm talking about the Moody Blues. And this is their album, A Question of Balance. Okay. My favorite Moody Blues album. When I was a kid, younger, kind of like, and I'm sure you guys have similar stories, I was just soaking in all different styles of music. I wanted it all. I wanted to hear everything. And I remember at a neighbor's house, I was cat sitting. So I, as a kid, strolled down in the basement just to see what was down in the basement, found crates of records, and this was one of them, not this particular copy, but I was drawn to the cover. The Moody Blues always had great covers to their records. And I'm like, what the hell is this? So I brought it home, put it on my turntable, and it just grabbed me right away. I think, I say progressive music because the Moody Blues mixed in poetry in their music. They mixed in spoken word, classical music, rock, pop, country, English pop, everything in between. And that's why I think they were probably one of the first prog bands. And a lot of people don't acknowledge that, but I think it's definitely true. This had the hit Question on it, but I also love The Tide Rushes In, one of the most beautiful songs ever. Justin Hayward he's got a phenomenal voice. All the guys sing on the record. It's just, a great band, one of my favorites, and they're not talked about a lot. And I was trying to think why, and I think they're too soft for certain people. I think the Moody Blues don't really rock that much. I think it's more like thinking music. Like I said, they mix some classical in there. There's different styles of music. So if you don't really have an open mind about that sort of thing, you're not going to dig the Moody Blues. Plus, they're a very English band. Sort of like Morrissey or the Smiths or the Cure. It's just they're very English, and I think, Americans, a lot of times, we just don't get that kind of stuff. For whatever reason, it resonates with me, and I still listen to the music of the Moody Blues. I love the Moody Blues. So.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, those first 6 Moody Blues albums are really fantastic. Actually, the first 7, because 7 Sojourn is kind of like the end of that classic period.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that one. You can't go wrong with any of those. And yeah, they were progressive rock, but they were very English and also almost a bit of Baroque pop in some ways too. They had a number of different vocalists, a number of songwriters. I mean, they really were everybody contributed in that band. And I was hoping when you're talking about you were cat sitting when you went down to the basement, that would have been a much cooler story if you said you found a torture chamber and human remains down there. But Moody Blues album is pretty cool too.
Well, that's the thing. Wherever I would go, like I would always try to put music into the conversation. Like if I met somebody new, like one of the first questions I always ask, hey, what bands are you into? What kind of music do you like to listen to? And if they really weren't into music, I'd walk away. Or I know it sounds bad, but like, this is going to sound really bad, but I don't want to associate with people who don't like music and who can't talk about music, because it's just such a passion of mine. And I know it is for you guys as well. And like, I need to share that with somebody. And I'm not saying that I don't talk to people who don't like music. I'm just saying that like, I want to be friends and I want to be around people who appreciate music as much as I do.
Yeah, it's hard not to judge people who don't like music and who can't tell you their favorite bands or their favorite artists. It's like always such a disappointment.
Yeah. I know. I'm like, you suck. And then I walk away.
Yeah, you'd be a lot cooler if you had a record collection.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, my genre, I have to talk about this genre because I live and breathe it. And I just did a couple episodes about this genre, as a matter of fact. But this is the very first album in the synth pop genre that I ever owned. And I saw the video on MTV for Never Let Me Down Again. And I was sold. I love that song. I went right out and I bought the cassette. And this is my first experience, other than seeing the People Are People video on MTV, which everybody saw back in the mid 80s. But this really reminded me a lot of believe it or not, a Pink Floyd album. I mean, this kind of looks a little bit like Hypnosis artwork, a little bit. And then you've got little segues on side 2, segues between the songs, little bits of audio verite. But I love it. It's just really, the title was meant to be ironic. They were music for the masses because obviously they were never, going to be about as commercial as they got was their next album, Violator. But at the time, that seemed really implausible that they would ever have a huge selling album or an album that they could market to the mainstream. But got Strange Love on here, which was a great radio club hit. I love Little 15. It's kind of one of the darker synth songs on here. Behind the Wheel. I love how their voices harmonize on the verses. Love that one. I Want You Now with that sound. It's almost like the sound of like a respirator or something that provides the background on there. Nothing is great. Still one of my favorite Depeche Mode albums because it's the first one I bought. And then I love this so much. I started working my way backwards in their catalog. But we just lost 3 viewers of the live stream after I showed that album, so you can see what a hit it was.
Well, and here's the thing about Depeche Mode, and I think that they made, and not that synth pop wasn't cool, Jeff, but I feel like I was going to say Def Leppard. Depeche Mode made synth pop cool. They made synth pop for people who didn't like synth pop. Like I was a kid who didn't really listen to synth pop, but I was totally into Depeche Mode. Mm-hmm. There was just something about their music that I think it had a darker quality to it.
That's it.
Also, I think that the vocals were haunting, and their lyrics were, you could like dig into their lyrics. And I like just the little touches of, like you said, Little 15 is this like dark ballad. And then that you mentioned the song with like that respirator sound. So like, I feel like they mixed a lot of cool stuff in their music and made it cool for people who didn't think they liked synth pop.
Yeah, I mean, not so much on this album, but you got songs about like bondage and S&M and
right. Who doesn't like that?
Yeah, like the dark side of relationships, songs that other bands, weren't singing about. Most bands would sing about, straightforward love songs and breakups. And with Depeche Mode, like the relationships were always complicated in the songs. Martin Gore was the one who wrote all the lyrics back in the day when these albums were coming out. And he just had like a real kind of a dark take on a love song, a song like Somebody what sounds like a straightforward love song until you get to the very last line, and then you're like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
And
And
I'll say, but you both kind of nailed it right there, because I've always said the thing that separated Depeche Mode out was, like, a lot of times in music, something will come along and everything will swing so far that way, and everyone tries to use that formula. And what it in the 80s, that was the synth, and going into this happy, fun, colorful type of environment, which is what made the 80s great, because
Yeah.
you could be on top and you could be, the head honcho, but you didn't have to be so serious. You could be colorful and fun. But Depeche Mode, they were ones that said, hey, there's still two sides to kind of that human spirit. And like I said, that dark, sexy, intense. It's like, yeah, we can be colorful, but we still kind of want that. And they just freaking nailed it.
yeah, absolutely.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
And the next album, Violator, I mean, how many freaking singles did that album have? Jeez, that was just all over the place.
Yeah, that kind of, if you weren't aware of Depeche Mode before then, you definitely, couldn't ignore them after that. After Personal Jesus and Enjoy the Silence came out, all those.
Yeah.
And this may be sinful, but Ultra is kind of my favorite Depeche Mode album.
And that followed Violator, right?
No, that came after Songs of Faith and Devotion.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like Dave Gahan, the lead singer, he was a mess during those album sessions. In fact, they had to, like, some of those songs, they had to cobble together different takes of his vocal because he was in no shape to even lay down like one single vocal take, because he was, trying to recover from, a pretty severe heroin addiction that almost cost him his life. But anyway, I don't want to lose any more viewers by talking about Depeche Mode any longer than we need to. So, Brandon, why don't you talk about your next one?
All right, so my next pick, I'm going to go, and this is one that can kind of cross over a lot of different genres. I'm going to put it in kind of electronic, maybe synth electronic, that type of thing, whatever you want to label that. But it was definitely the band I felt that brought me into that style of music, and it was New Order. I mean, just and again, with all of these things, it always goes back to, I remember that first time I heard it, and I was a freshman at college, and from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. weren't quiet hours. You could play music in your dorm as loud as you want. And one day, these two soccer players that were my suite mates, I just hear a freaking Bizarre Love Triangle blasting out of their room. And I was like, what in the world is that? Like, it was just, it was one of those things, like, it kind of, like, it made you want to dance. It made me feel very excited. Like, all these feelings were taking place. And I wasn't even paying attention to the fact that it was the music that was making me do that. And so I remember going through the bathroom, and I was knocking on their bathroom door, and I'm like, dude, what is that you're playing? He's like, New Order. And that was the introduction to, I guess, that style of music for me. But of course, this greatest hit, pretty much kind of a greatest hits with that, just all kind of classics on here. But I do think that Bizarre Love Triangle is still to this day my favorite New Order song.
Yeah, well, it's interesting if you listen to the original version on the Brotherhood album, which was the album that was released right before that, the studio album. As a matter of fact, any of the studio versions, I don't mean studio versions, but I mean like album versions proper of some of those songs, never liked them as much as I like the remixed versions that are on Substance. Substance is like the quintessential New Order album. Like, that's the only New Order album, if you're just a casual fan, that you need. But that was really like a college staple. Like, everybody seemed to have that cassette back then because it had Blue Monday on it, and it had True Faith, and it had Bizarre Love Triangle, and it had Thieves Like Us, all those great synth pop, whatever you want to call it, electronic songs, club songs. Such a great one. And Technique, the album after that, was a great follow-up to that album, because a lot of those songs sound like they would have fit on Substance too. So
yeah, then you're totally right about like the remixes and stuff on there, because like one of the things that bugged me so much is when I went out and bought, I don't remember which version it was. It wasn't Substance. It was a studio album, But regardless, the piece on there with Bizarre Love Triangle, where they completely took out the whole voice box piece in the middle of it, and I was like, that was one of the quintessential pieces of that song that just blew my mind. And I
Mhm.
was like, yep, got to find substance.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
they just reissued it this past year. Because I thought for sure, because they'd come out with a number of different New Order compilations, I thought there's no way they're ever going to reissue that. And then lo and behold, they did.
Yeah. I grabbed it. I have 2 original pressings. I grabbed a copy of the reissue too. It was just like one of those must-haves.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I love the CD version has all the B sides on the second disc if you've got it, if you
Yeah.
get it on CD. So
Nice.
all right, Chris.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk about the genre of country. So if people haven't turned it off by this point, now they're going to turn it off. But as a kid, I wasn't really a huge fan of country music. I was more into, I was getting into hard rock, heavy metal, and stuff like that. But my friend's mom was really, these stories sound so funny. My friend's mom was really into Randy Travis. And she would play Randy Travis all the time. Every time we got in the car, she had a Randy Travis cassette going. She had Randy Travis CDs. So one day I just sat down and listened to Randy Travis. And there was, as I said, I wasn't really too into country music, but I started to read the words and listen to the words of country music. And what I liked about it in terms of Randy Travis was he just said what he felt. And that was the thing with country music. It was like, if you were going to sing a song about walking down the street and walking into a store and, talking to your friend, that's what you said in the lyrics. It was just sort of like down to earth lyrics, and it spoke to me. And one of the first Randy Travis albums I heard was his debut called Storms of Life. This is one of the greatest country music albums ever. And the cool thing about this album is that at this time, a little bit before this, country music was sort of going through this identity crisis like it is now. Like it was more pop country, rock country. You had like Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton singing Islands in the Stream. And again, I like that song, but it's not really country music. And then you had these artists come in who were considered the new traditionalists, like Randy Travis, Reba McEntire, George Strait, Dwight Yoakam. And they were making real country music. And this album, like I said, it's one of the greatest albums in terms of country music of all time. And I just love Randy Travis's delivery. He's got that deep vocal quality. The songs are so well written. That's what I love about traditional country music. It speaks to me. I know a lot of people don't like country music. They're like, oh, it's too twangy. I hate the pedal steel guitar and blah, 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 blah. And I get it. It's not for everybody, but if you're gonna listen to country music, this is probably one of the albums you should check out. Randy Travis's Storms of Life. And as I said, I had to represent one of my favorite genres. So
awesome. Yeah, no, I know. He's even got a song, I don't know what album it's on, but about getting the oil changed in his car. He's talking about it's been 3,000 miles and, he knows that he needs to get better gas mileage out of his car. And
yeah,
he takes it in and he's driving home and he's like, the car runs better. It's accelerating better, and just how grateful he is that he got his oil changed. But yeah, it's like songs for everyday life,
And that led me to artists like Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard and, all those guys. Dolly Parton, I started to listen to her early stuff. I like early Dolly Parton. But and that's me. I don't like the newer country music for the most part because I feel like it's going through an identity crisis again. I feel like they don't know what to do with country music now. It's almost like if you sing with a Southern accent, you can call it country music, even if it's got like a rock background to it. Yeah. And I'm all about mixing genres and things like that. But I really feel country music is one of those musics that needs to stay traditional. I need to hear a pedal steel. I need to hear a fiddle. I need to hear a song about walking by the general store and meeting your girlfriend down by the, tasty whatever, And Randy Travis is one of those guys that does it for me.
Yeah, it's like sometimes with like with a lot of things, we like to make it bigger and more complicated, and we think more is better. But that's one of the beauty, especially about the older country, is just getting back to there's no gigantic interpretation in this song. Like they're telling a simple story that almost any human being on the face of the planet can understand, and that's a peaceful thing sometimes.
There was a country writer. His name was Harlan Howard. He wrote a shitload of country songs for everybody, and he dubbed the phrase that country music is 3 chords and the truth. And that's what it is. It's 3 chords and the truth, very much like blues.
Right.
You know, the blues pattern is very similar in every song. You know it when you hear it. Simple lyrics. You don't need a lot there to bring about an emotion.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. Nobody's watching this video, Jeff.
Well, it's because you're talking about country music. What'd you expect?
Well, wait till my next genre.
Oh God, show tunes. Yeah, we get talk about show tunes, and the one remaining person watching this video is like, I am fucking out of here.
Well, and you know what? It's funny, but it actually is show tunes.
Yes. Oh my God. See, I know you. I see, and the one, already.
Oh.
But it's cool. It's cool show tunes, though.
Yeah. Okay. All right. If you say
is that an oxymoron? Cool show.
Yeah,
tune?
it is.
I think it's cool.
All right. Well, my genre, if we haven't cleared the room out already, is going to clear it out for sure. My next genre is going to be jazz, and this is the first jazz album that I ever owned. The album that got me into jazz, and in college, I was in this music appreciation college course as one of my electives, and I really, I just thought jazz was like Benny Goodman and like just really old stuff that I had no interest in, like I forget some of the song, but like just there was like a lot of 70s stuff that passed for jazz back then, but anyway, he played this record and I remember like, holy shit, this is jazz. This is unbelievable. And I fell in love with the artist, and he's one of my favorite jazz artists to this day. I'm talking about Pat Metheny. And this was the record that he played, Still Life Talking. Because it's not like any jazz that I had ever heard of. It's, probably closer to maybe jazz fusion, I guess. But Pat Metheny's an excellent guitar player. This is a fantastic album, and it's got keyboards on it. It's got great guitar playing. It's kind of ambient in spaces, but I absolutely love that. I love Pat Metheny. It puts me in such a mellow, chill mood to listen to it. And since that time, I've gone on and like jazz is now one of my favorite genres. I've got quite a few jazz records, but I, dug deep into, Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Thelonious Monk and all the other ones. But that was my first introduction. And I'm like, I can't believe I've not gotten into this particular style of music sooner. But
I agree with you. I think growing up as a kid, you're like, jazz, that's like what my parents listened to. And that's not cool.
It's like Glenn Miller. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost showed a jazz record. I was going to show a Miles Davis record because I feel like with his jazz fusion stuff, it like bridged the gap between like hard rock and jazz and put it together. And it just shows you that jazz can be so much more than, like a Benny Goodman or something like that. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Most people don't talk about jazz like rock, where you have yacht rock, you have metal, and most people think jazz is just kind of one linear thing, but it really is just as diverse, if not more.
Yeah.
Than like rock music. So
John Lennon thought jazz was boring. Okay.
That's why I never listened to it until I waited until he died to get into jazz, so he wouldn't give me shit about it.
And what does John Lennon know, anyways? Jeez.
That was my attitude.
Yeah. Well, his style of jazz is Yoko Ono screaming.
Jeez. All right. So I had a number of different picks, and I was going to do jazz, but since you just did it, I'm going to skip jazz. but I do want to show just really quick what my jazz pick was. And it was Kenny G Live.
Wow.
If talk about getting rid of anyone that's left sitting here.
Yeah, Brandon, I don't know if I'd be showing your Kenny G records.
I'm sorry. This album is fantastic. It is absolutely fantastic. But again, since I'm not picking it, I won't go into detail why. I'm gonna go with reggae.
Okay.
So that's kind of a genre maybe we don't talk about as much. And the first album that brought me into reggae was this one right here, which is, I'm trying to get that glare, guys. Sorry. Jimmy Cliff, The Power and the Glory. This was his release from 1983. Really fantastic album. I mean, of course, Jimmy Cliff is one of those names. Is kind of that same ballpark with Bob Marley, in terms of like one of the legends that have been in the jazz and not jazz world, in the reggae world for so long. But I think the one thing that really brought this album to my attention at a time when I'm listening to mostly hard rock and hip hop and stuff like that is he had two songs off of here. One is called "We All Are One," and another one called Reggae Nights. And both of those songs, which they were reggae songs, but they had just enough of kind of a poppy, sometimes R&B element to them, that he had videos that were getting regular rotation, mainly on BET Video Soul, but every now and then on MTV, a little later down the line, but mainly on BET's Video Soul. So I used to see those videos all the time, and I'm just like, he sounds different. He has that whole reggae thing going, and I like the way it's coming across. And I went and got the tape later on, and really discovered that I love almost every single song on this album. Definitely one of the more accessible albums for those that maybe aren't really into reggae, where you're like, I need a little bit of a pop flavor, a little bit of something maybe that I can kind of feel at home or familiar with, but at the same time, I can be introduced to one of the greatest reggae artists of all time, which is Jimmy Cliff. So really, really fantastic album. Cannot recommend it enough.
Nice. Yeah, that's a genre I don't really know too much about.
Bob Marley and the Wailers live, Christian says. Yeah, I bet it does. I just saw that Bob Marley movie, and that reminded me what a genius Bob Marley was.
Yeah,
yeah, sometimes live albums are greatest hits, really.
Yeah. Are you talking about the Babylon Bus or just live?
Just said Bob Marley and the Wailers live.
Okay. Because the Babylon Bus, which is also a live, it's Bob Marley and the Wailers live, that might arguably be one of the best live recordings I've ever heard. It's like whether you get it on CD, on vinyl, it just sounds, it totally puts you there. I don't know exactly how they did the recording, but it's fantastic.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a genre I need to explore more. I mean, I'm wondering, you think about the band The Clash. They mixed a lot of reggae into their sound. I'm wondering, I don't know, maybe you guys know how reggae reached, these white English guys. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like something that would mesh punk and reggae. I mean, I know you had bands like Bad Brains who did it, but I always wondered what influenced The Clash to kind of go down that reggae road.
I think back in that, I mean, I don't know the specific answer to that, but I think like the general 30,000 foot view is, it seemed like guys back in the UK and stuff like that were much more open to taking in, black music, if you will, back then than a lot of the bands were here in the US.
Right.
And, whether you look at the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and on and on, they were all about Howling Wolf, Muddy Waters, and so when they heard something that was good, they were willing to. Yeah. So I would assume that's probably what happened with the Clash as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Police and the Rolling Stones,
right.
And
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, Well, Jeff joked about it, but I'm going to talk about Broadway right now. All right. So listen, before we turn off our video, our screen, our TV, whatever you're watching on your VCR, I'm showing Jesus Christ Superstar, people. All right. Now, this is a rock opera. Andrew Lloyd Webber. You guys know who plays Jesus? Ian Gillan from Deep Purple plays the part of Jesus on here. This is a heavy rockin' album. I listened to this nonstop in high school with my friends all the time. The beginning guitar riff, it's so heavy. Andrew Lloyd Webber went on to write Phantom of the Opera and Sunset Boulevard and things like that. But Cats, Cats. I like the music from Cats, but I've never seen the production. I heard the production's brutal. But anyway, Jesus Christ Superstar, 70s hard rock, great music. As I said, Ian Gillan, phenomenal on the vocals. He's got his screaming in it. This is what kind of showed me what Broadway could be, because, you know, you think about Broadway like jazz, you're thinking like, you know, My Fair Lady or Sound of Music. And again, I like Sound of Music, but as a kid, you didn't think that Broadway could be cool. Andrew Lloyd Webber showed us that with Jesus Christ Superstar. There were other plays. The play Godspell had awesome music. It had a hit called Day by Day on there. It mixed folk and psychedelic music. So Broadway at this time was expanding their sound. They were moving away from My Fair Lady and Mame and all those, you know, West Side Story type stuff to a more like contemporary sound, and it works. I still think Jesus Christ Superstar sounds fresh today.
Yeah, it's funny. My wife, she's always buying tickets for like these Broadway shows and stuff that come into town, and so she got us tickets to see Jesus Christ Superstar, and she took myself and she took her sister, and she'd never seen it before. She just like had heard about it, and she knew it was Andrew Lloyd Webber, and she's like, "Yeah, let's go see Jesus Christ Superstar." And anyway, she hated it. Like at the end, she hated it. I was like digging it because I'd seen it before and I heard the soundtrack and all that. She like absolutely hated it. And I'm like, but like, you know, you got to know Ian Gillan sang on the original, and she's like, "It's Ian Gillan, you asshole." And I'm like, but still, he sang on the original soundtrack album, and that like impressed her at all. I mean, I guess, you know, and I think it was probably like too much religion, you know, too much whatever. But it is like such a great, and it's like interesting, like Andrew Lloyd Webber and was it Tim Rice? You know,
Yeah.
that was one of the, it's like, but it's rock and roll. It's like such a cool rock and roll. I still love I need to get that soundtrack as a matter of fact, but South Pacific soundtrack. Do you have that one, Chris?
I think I have it on CD actually. Yeah. But I like a lot of different Broadway. I mean, my favorite composer is Stephen Sondheim. Stephen Sondheim wrote Sweeney Todd. He wrote Into the Woods. He's got sort of a non-traditional way of writing a musical, and I think some people listen to his music and they don't like it because of that. He doesn't always go for like the hit or the pretty melody. It's more about a feeling with his music, and so I kind of dig he kind of pushes the envelope a little bit in terms of you know, Broadway.
Well, if you like Tommy, like Aaron Mutha Alamare does, you will like Jesus Christ Superstar, because it's the same thing. It's like a rock opera.
Right. Or Godspell. I love the music from Godspell.
Yeah, Godspell.
And
Megan likes it. Megan likes Jesus
thank
Christ.
you, Megan.
Superstar.
Well, we heard you didn't like it.
Well, no, that's my daughter.
Oh.
My wife's the one who hated Jesus Christ Superstar, but
Oh, okay. I was getting the story mixed up.
well, and I think it was like, you know, for example, the part where it's like the 40 lashes.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, we're on like lash number 19, and you're like, holy shit, how long is this going to go on? Like, geez, you know, Jesus. I'm like, yeah, Jesus right there. But yeah, so it's like, you know, stuff like that. It's kind of like if you don't know the biblical context of it and you don't know the whole story of the Passion, you're probably like, what the hell is going on? This is a little too much. But yeah, you grew up with musical. Yeah, absolutely. I love, you know, I like more show tunes than I care to. And then how about Chess? I love Chess. If you like ABBA, Chess would be right up your alley. Less Miserable. Yeah. 2LP is great. Wow. Saw it back in London in 86. Wow.
Wow.
What about the Grease 2 soundtrack? Does that count?
Grease?
The Grease 2 soundtrack, does that count?
Grease. I saw Grease 2 on stage last year. Also.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I was about to say I didn't hear that. I would have totally been there with you.
I don't know if we should allow Brandon on these videos anymore. I mean, he's showing Kenny G records. He's talking.
But
about
I do remember
Grease
when we got cable back in the 80s. I watched Grease 2. I probably saw it like 10 times. You know, I loved that movie back then. You know, and I don't know if it's just because nothing else on, and they always showed movies on repeat. But I totally remember Grease. I saw Grease 2 before I ever saw the first Grease. So,
oh man, I rocked the heck out of that soundtrack to no end. I love that.
That is great. Michelle Pfeiffer, man.
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
It was so funny because like my brother, he's an actor out in Hollywood, and he had some project he was working on. The guy that played Goose in Grease 2. I'm not gonna remember his name, but it was the guy that played Goose. He was working on this project with him, and he was like, I was all excited to meet him, and I was like, hey, you know, we're talking. I'm like, yeah, Grease 2, my brothers and I, we loved it to death. It was, and he turns to him and goes, I didn't think anybody liked that movie. Like even he thought it was a piece of crap.
You know, I'd have to rewatch it. And maybe I would think that way. I don't know. I would love to rewatch it though, and I know the memories would come flooding back to me. Oh, Sergeant Pepper movie sucked. Yeah, that movie is a pile of shit. Dirty Dancing, yeah,
that's a great one.
That
was a great movie. Yeah, I made out with my high school girlfriend to that movie.
Well, my next genre is, and I guess I'm uncool.
Well, and I'm kidding around with you because what have I shown? I've shown a country record tonight. I showed a freaking Broadway show tune album. Like, yeah, and I'm poking fun at you about Kenny G. I mean,
hey, we can't help that we're confident men.
Yeah, exactly. Real men listen to Kenny G. Real men listen to Broadway show tune.
That's what I love about Brandon and Chris. They're not afraid to show anything. You know, they don't care.
No, I could have very easily shown Metallica Ride the Lightning or Black Flag My War, but no, people. I showed frickin' Randy Travis and Jesus Christ Superstar. So take that.
You haven't even gotten to your Rod McEwen pick yet.
No, that's true.
All right. Well, my next genre is one. And this is a band that I remember like back in the 70s, like I hated it. Maybe because they were all over the radio. I didn't care for the lead singer's voice. I just wasn't interested in this band at all. I kind of looked at them the same way like back in the day that I looked at Chicago, like this music sucks. And then for whatever reason, I remember I was in one of these it was an outlet mall, and they had a music store, and it was a total impulse buy that I bought this CD, and I don't remember why, because for the longest time I had hated this band, or at the very least I was very indifferent towards this band. Their songs would come on the radio, and I more often than not just turn it off. And then I got this and I listened to it. And I'm like, holy shit, this album is amazing. This band is amazing. I'm talking about Yes. This was classic Yes, which was the album. And it was a CD that I bought at the time at this outlet mall. And it is every essential track. Starship Trooper is on here. Heart of the Sunrise, which I'd never heard before until I got the CD, is amazing. And I think it was more the songs I hadn't heard before that blew me away. You know, because there's like Long Distance Runaround. I'd heard that, which is great. What else is on here? The Fish, and You and I can't believe I've Seen All Good People isn't on here. I thought for sure it was. But like Yours Is No Disgrace, I'd never heard that before. And I was just like, mind blown. I couldn't believe how great this album was, and it turned me into a prog rock. Then I'm like, okay, I got to buy more Yes, and then buying Yes got me into Emerson, Lake and Palmer, got me into early Genesis, got me into earlier Pink Floyd albums, pre-Dark Side of the Moon, all that stuff I'd never explored before because I thought it's boring. The songs are too long. I just wasn't into it. And then this was like a sea change for me where I had this epiphany like, yes, progressive rock is awesome. I bought a bunch of Queen albums.
Queen is not progressive rock, Jeff.
I'm waiting for somebody to comment. Queen's not progressive rock.
Well, I said the Moody Blues were progressive rock.
Spaces, yeah.
I know people will call it heresy if you say that, but
yeah. The prog community is they're very close knit and just very protective of their music.
They very are. They're very proprietary when it comes to what's prog and what's not. But
yeah, I love Yes. They're like they've got to be up in that ultimate prog group, like top 3 of the ultimate prog groups. I mean, they just bleed prog. I mean, I'm thinking of their album Tales of Topographic Oceans. I think it's a double record with like 4 songs. Each song is like 26 minutes long.
Yeah,
and it's what was great about Yes is they could also write catchy melodies as well. You mentioned that song And You and I. That's a beautiful song. And then of course everybody knows Owner of a Lonely Heart. But thanks, Christian. I love you too, Christian.
Says, just kidding. Yeah, well, the thing about Yes is it's like some of those songs. There's like 8 songs in one. It's like one song, but there's like 8 different parts, and they all move through different suites and different tempos and different moods, which is what I love about that. So, Welcome to My Nightmares. If that's a play, I don't know. Is it?
I don't know.
10 years after Prague, I don't know. Alvin Lee, was he progressive rock? Is Kiss Prague? I don't know.
The Elder.
The Elder you might say. I, Robot, Intro to Prague.
That's a good one.
Yeah, people forget because all the Alan Parsons Project that I heard on the radio back in the day was like really mellow. But they were definitely prog rock.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Good choice.
Yeah. All right, Brandon, what's your do we have any more picks?
Yeah, this is the last one, I think.
Okay.
Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. No, yes, right. Yeah, this is the last one.
Okay.
All right. And let's see. Actually, I'll get your guys' help on this. Do you want my hip hop pick or my glam/hard rock pick?
Glam, hard rock.
Glam.
Okay. We'll do that one. So for me, I'll just dive right into it. Goes back to Twisted Sister, Stay Hungry.
Nice.
Again, I have to give all the credit to my friend Matt, the same one that made that mixtape. Like that guy introduced me to so much music, it's not even funny. But his brother was one of the main DJs at the local hard rock station. So his brother had just an album collection that was absolutely insane. And we used to call him up on the radio station all the time and ask him to play stuff for us, and he always would. So Matt had access to a lot of music. But yeah, this was kind of the first thing on the glam and hard rock side that he hooked me up to. And that summer, I just remember between the 3 of us, Matt, John, and myself, like this cassette just never left our boom boxes. No matter whose house you were at, we're out front riding bikes or whatever else, this was playing. And I still think it's one of the absolute perfect hard rock / glam albums in terms of truly loving every single song on the album. Of course you have the big hits like Stay Hungry. I'm sorry, We're Not Gonna Take It and I Want to Rock. That was their big MTV rotation, all that type of stuff. But when you get into like a lot of the other songs, like Don't Let Me Down, The Beast, The Price, Burn in Hell, I mean, just everything on this was fantastic. Just an absolute perfect album. And I remember listening to Dee Snider, this was just a few days ago. I was listening to some podcast thing he was doing when he was talking about it. And he was like, I pretty much wrote the entire album in like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
He said his wife had to go run an errand or something like that. And he was like, pretty much when she came back, I had the idea for every single song on the album. And it's just absolute killer. Love it. I absolutely love it.
Well, what's great about that album too is I would put that in the same league as Quiet Riot's Mental Health. That those were the albums that brought that style of music to the masses.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that was where like we said, or record companies were like, holy crap, like this style of music could sell a lot of records. And those were the bands and those were the albums where then you had a bunch of copycats after that. You know?
Right.
But
yeah,
yeah, good stuff.
Ended up merging or morphing, I should say, into that formula of get a rock hit, do a ballad. Get a rock hit, do a ballad. And it's just like
Well, I was
everybody.
talking to somebody about this the other day in terms of glam rock, you know, and I love all these bands. So Aaron, if you're still watching this, I love these bands, but I just want to say one thing. There got to a point with glam rock where you could predict, listening to the album, what the next song was going to sound like because they all followed the same formula. And it got to the point where like the third song was always the ballad. And it just, I don't know, it got to the point where, and this is why grunge took over, but it got to the point where everything was predictable.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's nice about that Twisted Sister album is that it was still a young genre at that point.
Yeah.
What I find funny is right when bands like Twisted Sister and Motley Crue were putting on makeup, Kiss was taking it off.
That's true. Yeah.
But, you know, anyway, Maureen says glam was sweet, middle 70s, band Sweet. Little Willie, was Little Willie glam rock? I always thought they were like Southern rock. Ballroom Blitz, Fox on the Run, and Eric Carmen, The Raspberries.
Yeah. I love Fox on the Run. It's such a great track. That whole album, I mean, that whole Sweet album is great.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people consider David Bowie glam as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
I don't know.
All right, Chris, show us your rod. McEwen.
I should have shown a Rod McEwen album, but I'm not showing a Rod McEwen album. I had to find a way to work this artist and this album into this, so I'm just going to put it under the umbrella of R&B and funk. And again, it's kind of selling this artist short because he did all different styles, but I'm talking about Prince and I'm talking about the album Around the World in a Day. This was the album. This is my favorite Prince album, by the way. Yes. And this followed Purple Rain. And what I think is so cool is that there was not a lot of hoopla around this album. Prince sort of just kind of released it. And he could have very easily made Purple Rain Part 2, but he didn't. This is a psychedelic record. The album that followed this, I think it's Parade. It's called Parade. That was a psychedelic record as well. He's funky on here. He's psychedelic. There's R&B on here. There's like everything. And it opened up my ears as a young kid to that style of music. And that, I know it led me to artists like Stevie Wonder, you know, and just kind of exploring those other sounds. And that's what Prince could do. I think Prince sort of was very smart because he sort of introduced us to those genres through rock, because he would always put the electric guitar in there. And you're like, oh, this is cool. But you didn't realize you were listening to R&B. You were listening to funk. You were listening to soul music. You just didn't realize it because it was draped with electric guitar. So Prince was a genius in that way. And this album is one of the greatest albums. I love this record.
Yeah, that's classic. I love, Pop Life on there. I love Paisley Park is a great song.
Of course, Raspberry Beret was on here.
Oh yeah.
What's cool is around this, they have singles, 12-inch singles for some of the songs on here. I picked up the 12-inch single for America, but what's cool about the 12-inch singles, on the other side, there's a non-album track. and a lot of times too, the songs are longer. So if you find the single for the song America, it's a longer jam version of it. So I'm kind of on the lookout for all the 12-inch singles from this album. So yeah.
I think you're right with what you said about him not making a big deal about releasing that album or not connecting it to Purple Rain, because I always felt like that was the album where he wanted to kind of show this was the new Prince, because nothing that he did after that sounded or came anything like Purple Rain.
Right.
So from his music to his image and everything else, I think he wanted a very clean cut from that success, which might have been a wise thing to do, actually, before they got played out, if you will.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just think it was cool to take a chance, and I think, I think people were kind of taken aback by it at first because they were expecting Purple Rain Part 2. And it opens up with the song Around the World in a Day, which sounds like it could have been off of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. It's just got that psychedelic vibe to it.
Yeah.
But it's just a very adventurous record.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
I actually think Parade, those two that came after Purple Rain, I think Parade's probably my favorite of the two. I think he had some really great stuff on that album.
Well, I think that's didn't that have Kiss on it?
Yeah, that had Kiss on it, which actually is probably my least favorite, even though that was a gigantic hit. But but stuff like Mountains or
Christopher Tracy's Parade.
Yeah. And what was the other one? Sometimes It Snows in April.
That's a great song.
Like that piano intro to that thing is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in my life. I mean,
like if you don't like Prince, I don't want to even talk to you. So Brandon, thank God you like Prince, and Jeff, thank God you like Prince, because if not, I wouldn't be talking to you.
Maureen says, I like funk, one who grew up on Soul Train. I remember watching Soul Train back in the day. That was like the cooler version of American Bandstand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
French Controversy. Yeah, that's a great one.
I very rarely listen to Purple Rain, and I love Purple Rain, but it's like, okay, yeah, how many times have I heard When the Doves Cry and Let's Go Crazy and Purple Rain and Darling Nikki and all that stuff? Like, I like that, but I'd rather listen to Sign of the Times. Yeah, nice. Or frickin' 1999. Even his first couple of records before he was still trying to find his sound. Those are more like R&B soul type albums, but still great stuff though.
Like Self-Titled and Dirty Mind, and and that's the thing. I always give him so much props. I mean, it's one thing to be Prince when Prince is Prince, but when you go back to those early days of like his first album and Dirty Mind, and you see him on that cover in those little whatever that freaking spandex thing is he's wearing, and the big coat, and like it still blows my mind that this little 4'5" light-skinned dude is I'm gonna put on, that's it right there. I'm gonna put on these big old plush heels and like do all of this stuff, and I'm gonna make myself the coolest, most sexy, most desired man in the entire world. To even have the vision to think that he can do that is just still amazing to me.
Yeah, and also he wrote Manic Monday for the Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
And
other First Life for Sheila E. and Love Bazaar. I mean, just makes so many things as it. Nothing Compares to You.
Yeah.
And what was the band that played with him sometimes? The
Revolution.
No. It was a whole different band.
The New Power Generation.
No, I think they were in Purple Rain too. Didn't they play live in Purple Rain, the movie? I'm trying to think of the other band. Morris Day and
Morris
Day. The Time. Yeah.
Didn't the Time play in the movie Purple Rain?
Yeah. It was kind of his nemesis, and
yeah,
it was really. I mean, that was kind of one of the interesting things of that backstory too, is because Prince, before Purple Rain really hit big, he was touring with Rick James, and he was opening for Rick James, and they got into this really, really competitive thing where being the performers they were always trying to outdo each other. And so not only were they stepping each other games up, but then it started happening outside as well, because then when Rick James went and started the Mary Jane Girls to have this all-female group, well, that's when Prince went in and got, Vanity Six and started doing the Apollonia thing and all of that. And then the Time was the exact same thing. Rick James went out and started, I think it was a group called Progress or Process, and then he came up with the Time. And so yeah, they were just really, they just kept like going at each other, trying to always outdo, and Prince just won by a mile. But I mean, still, Rick James is a bad boy.
That's so cool. I don't think I've ever seen Purple Rain all the way through. I got to change that. I got to watch that movie.
Yeah, I think it got a theatrical release a few years back. Like they re-released it, at least around here. It was playing, but yeah. Anyway, because he had like what 3 movies that he starred in. There was Graffiti Bridge, and then
wasn't a movie called Under the Cherry Moon?
Under the Cherry Moon,
yeah. Which Parade was a soundtrack to that movie.
And that was kind of weak too. I mean, wasn't the best movie in the world at all.
No, definitely a disappointing follow-up. And then Graffiti Bridge was supposed to be the sequel to Purple Rain.
Mm-hmm.
Was it as good as Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park?
I mean, what is. I mean, that's kind of the bar by which all other rock movies are measured. It's Star Wars meets A Hard Day's Night.
Yeah.
If you like Star Wars or if you like A Hard Day's Night, you'll still be disappointed in Kiss meets Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
But anyway.
All right.
Kiss Burnout in the 80s, yeah. Well, you could say that about a lot of artists in the 80s who were kind of overdone, but...
Well, wait, how could you get Prince Burnout in the 80s when every album was different? Like, I felt like he was pushing the genre.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you thought like, if I hear When Doves Cry one more time on the radio, but
yeah,
I don't know. Anyway, you got to rattle, Brandon. There's some rattle.
Is it?
Sounds like a woodpecker.
Yeah, that's what it kind of sounds like.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but it's like I mute them and then it's gone.
Oh.
I can't even hear it on my side, so I don't even know what to do about it.
Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, all right, moving on. So anyway, this record that I'm going to show, this was my introduction to 60s rock and roll. My dad, even though I'm a huge Beatles fan, my dad hated the Beatles, did not care for the Beatles at all. And so the 60s music that I heard around the house was the Rolling Stones. Played this album to death. This is like such a great double album. There's absolutely no filler on here, and you could have added about 20 more songs too to make this like a triple record, and they would have all been hits. But this was my introduction to 60s rock. Fell in love with 60s rock. Ended up discovering the Beatles, but I mean, name a great Rolling Stones from this song from the 60s. I guarantee it's on this collection. Even the artwork was very cool, like very mysterious. Like look at all the silhouettes stacked on top of each other. Was very cool. The gatefold, but yeah, Rolling Stones. To this day, I am a huge Rolling Stones fan. They're either, depending on the day, my number 2 or number 3 band. And that was what we heard around the house all the time. All those great hits like Under My Thumb, Satisfaction, The Last Time. Time's on My Side, Paint It Black, Sympathy for the Devil, Street Fighting Man, Jumpin' Jack Flash. I mean, you name it. It's all.
Let It Be, Mean Mr. Mustard.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just pissed Jeff off, I think.
I know. He's so pissed at you, he muted
He
himself.
doesn't even know what to say.
No, I had to yell at my kid.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. But
Yeah.
So I think what would be fun right now, because we've all shown our 5 albums, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I feel, well, they were all different genres. So I think we should each show the 2 albums that are like polar opposites of what we showed. Like for me, I do Prince and Randy Travis. I mean, you can't get much more polar opposite than that.
You think?
Oh, Kenny G and Twit. Yeah, that's pretty polar opposite.
Yeah, probably for me it'd be these 2, right?
Depeche Mode, yes.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you that the 3 of us, listen to a lot of different styles of music.
Mhm.
Definitely. Which is good.
My 10-year-old self loved the Monkees. Afterwards was Paul Revere. Yeah, Where the Action Is. I don't remember ever seeing that, but Paul Revere and the Raiders. I think my dad had their greatest hits.
My parents had that Rolling Stones greatest hits you showed. My parents had that on 8-track, and they would listen to it in their Cutlass Wagon Supreme, the oldest.
Was it 2 8-tracks or just one?
I don't know. I was young. I remember it could have been 2 8-tracks. I just remember that cover of the silhouetted heads.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't remember if it was 2 or not. But I just remember seeing that cover as a kid, and then putting the 8-track in, and I think that's one of my first musical memories that I remember. But yeah. Well,
and there's just something, I mean, they were really in competition with the Beatles. And, there was an interview with Keith Richards where it was like they would say, okay, you're releasing a single. All right, well, we'll put ours off until, a while to let your single have the spotlight. And then they would like try to time their releases so they didn't compete with each other.
Right.
Which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I mean, there's certain, if we're talking like 2 singles that were out at the same time, Beatles versus Stones, like Revolution versus Jumpin' Jack Flash, which one would you pick? I mean, it's really hard to say, let's spend the night together, or Strawberry Fields Forever, or, Paint It Black versus Paperback Writer. Which one would you choose? And, I mean, there's some instances where I would actually pick the Rolling Stones over the Beatles.
Yeah. No, they're, like you said, they kind of went neck and neck, and I think they each kind of pushed each other to, make better and better music. I think they each influenced each other whether they knew it or not.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, kind of a comparison I would make, because the Beach Boys were also kind of in that mix, but I feel like, here, college football rivals, it's always been the University of Michigan and Ohio State, and then a sub rivalry was Michigan and Michigan State. And I feel that's how it was. Like the Beatles' main rival was the Rolling Stones, and then their like lesser rival was the Beach Boys. Yeah. But you had that competition with all those 60s bands. I mean, you can throw the Kinks in there, you can throw the Byrds. I mean, there are all those great bands out at the time that were just putting out such great music. And what a exciting time to be alive, to just be waiting for the next single. And how much more experimental was it going to be? I can't even imagine. But
right.
Yeah, but you talk about like how good that Hot Rocks was in terms of like all the hits. And what about that greatest hits they put out? Like I think it's like 2019 or something like that. Honk. Did you? I don't know if you ever grabbed that one or not, but it's basically like a continuation of the Hot Rocks. Yeah, it's like pretty much kind of picking up where Tattoo You or whatever, and kind of all the hits that took place after that. And between those two, you have a hell of a Beatles, a Stones collection just in those 2 albums.
Yeah, this really is like the, the Hot Rocks from the 71 forward, because you got, Start Me Up, Brown Sugar, Miss You, Tumbling Dice, Just Your Fool, which I think is a newer one. But then you've got Fool to Cry, Angie, Beast of Burden, It's Only Rock and Roll, Doom and Gloom, which is another new song. But yeah, I mean, I think I could have done without some of the newer tracks and put maybe some of the other 70s stuff like Do 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 Do, Heartbreaker, for example, or Dance Little Sister, stuff like that on here. I think, looking at this, the track listing could have been a little stronger, but yeah, I mean, this is as close as you're going to get to like the sequel to Hot Rocks. But
And I think what was cool about the Stones is obviously they went through different decades of music and different decades of style and fashion and what was cool and what was not. So as music people, we saw maybe what would have happened to the Beatles if they continued into the 80s and the 90s. What would have happened to Led Zeppelin if they continued into the 80s and the 90s? And I think we saw through the Rolling Stones that there would probably be a lot of good, but also some bad that would come with that as well. So the Rolling Stones kind of showed what one of those 60s bands did as they, progressed through the decades.
Yep. Yeah, well, in the Rolling Stones, I mean, they started out as a blues band. They were all doing blues, a lot of Willie Dixon numbers, a lot of R&B covers. They covered Marvin Gaye a couple times, and they've got some Muddy Waters covers and things like that. And then they moved into more of that psychedelic period. And then with Beggar's Banquet, like the Beatles did with the White Album, they stopped with all that, experimental stuff in the studio, kind of got back to basics.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, their trajectories were very similar in that way. Hey, DMG, I think this might be the first time you joined us, but welcome to the live stream. Glad you're with us, even if you came in a little bit late. But yeah, this will be up available to watch. Well, it's probably up available to watch right now, but anyway, yeah, Rewind, I think, was awesome. That's another great hits compilation that takes it up through like from the 70s through like the early 80s. Some Girls was a great comeback. Yeah, I called it a comeback album before, and I've had some Rolling Stones fan be very indignant. No, it's not. It was not a comeback because they had, whatever. Black and Blue was a great album, or It's Only Rock and Roll, but whatever. I think it was a comeback. I mean, one of the great Stones albums of the 70s, but anyway.
Yeah, they also reissued that 40 Licks a little while ago.
Yeah, that's a great one too. I've had that CD in my car, and it's just again hit after hit after hit.
How was their blues album? Wasn't it Black and Blue or something like that? Or
this one,
Blue something.
Blue and Lonesome.
Yeah, Blue and Lonesome. How is that?
It's good. It's good. It's kind of like Eric Clapton's From the Cradle, if you remember that album.
Yeah.
Where it's all blues. Some original, I think some covers, but I Can't Quit You, Baby, the song that Led Zeppelin covered on their first album. But yeah, it's decent if you like Rolling Stones doing blues. That's a good one. Brandon, what was the hip hop album you were going to show?
Oh, that was going to be Africa Bambaataa, Planet Rock.
Nice.
I'm sorry about the glare, guys. Yeah, Africa Bambaataa, Soul Sonic Force, which was really my introduction to hip hop. I mean, everyone kind of heard the Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight and all of that. But even though that was technically rap music and probably the first time most had heard rap music, I think this was really kind of the first gateway that really, for me, that showed this is what this hip hop thing is going to be. And it was just a lot of funk inside of it, a lot of electronic stuff inside of it. The amount of stuff that he sampled from Kraftwerk on this album, I'm talking like note for note Kraftwerk songs that you almost really have to give props when people say that, Bambaataa is one of the, the godfathers of hip hop. Well, if you're going to say that, then you have to say Kraftwerk were the guys that really wrote what became, ended up becoming hip hop, because he sampled so many things from them off of that album. But I remember going over to my cousin Theron's house one night, and his mom asked me to stay for dinner. And it's like, yeah, I bought a couple of new records if you guys want to listen to them. And it was the 12-inch single of Planet Rock and Rapture by Blondie.
Oh, yeah.
And so, we spun Rapture, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. But when he put on Planet Rock, it was just one of those like total moments. And yeah, I mean, and to this day, it's just still one of the absolute foundations of my hip hop world.
Yeah, for me, if I would to show a rap album, it'd probably be like I have a choice of four. Like I could show Run DMC Raising Hell. That was a huge album.
Mm-hmm.
Beastie Boys, I'd have to show like License to Ill. I know that they did other styles besides rap. Ice Cube's Predator is one of my favorite rap albums, but then I also have to go with Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet. That album is phenomenal. And just I love the fact that Public Enemy had the balls to get together with Anthrax, and Anthrax had the balls to get together with Public Enemy, and it worked though. And that's what I like about bands like Public Enemy, is that they weren't afraid to try different things within that genre of rap. So,
yeah, I think I almost showed I would have shown the Low End Theory by A Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah,
for my introduction to rap. I mean, like everybody, I'd heard License to Ill. I had that on cassette, but in terms of like true hip hop, it definitely would have been A Tribe Called Quest for me.
Yeah, I'd really gotten into breakdancing before, rap and hip hop became anything where it was kind of towards the mainstream. So a lot of those early groups like UTFO and things like that never were gigantic names. They were just the stuff that, we were spinning around in our heads and doing all the cardboard stuff with. And again, still today, just some of my absolute favorite hip hop. It was something that was just kind of, again, I always use that word pure, like before things got all,
Would remember Kid and Play?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Would they be considered? Is that considered hip hop or?
Yeah, I would say, I'd say rap / hip hop. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know I don't know the true difference between like rap and hip hop, where it would. I know that probably melds together a lot, but
yeah,
I remember Kid and Play were fun.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much there were kind of in my personal opinion, there were two things that really started to divide, where things started to become something other than just rap music. And it's like from that early 80s, really going up to somewhere around 88-ish, somewhere in that ballpark, 89, it pretty much was just rap music. It was a lot of very similar beats, very similar kind of, rhyming, phrasing, and that type of thing. And the one thing you can always identify is when you look on a cover and you see the artist smiling, it was probably rap music.
Yeah.
But then somewhere around 88, 89, or, Straight Outta Compton comes out and all of that, the rap starts taking like these branches, and all of a sudden it's like, you can do rap music, but now there's also this gangster rap thing. And now there's also this kind of, back to Africa thing, or this mother knowledge thing. Like all these different branches started to really kind of span. And that's where I think people really got into, that's not rap music. This is what hip hop, and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But just look at the cover. If they're smiling, it's rap music. If they're not, you may have to figure out what it is.
What if you see a Raiders baseball cap? Then it's probably gangster rap too.
As long as they're smiling underneath it, that's the key. If the artist is smiling, it's rap.
I feel like Ice Cube.
Gangster rap. It's just...
Ice Cube was always wearing a Raiders hat. But
and the most pissed off.
I think you didn't you hold up a DJ Jazzy Jeff album one time, Brandon? I think you did.
A long time ago, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I always loved DJ Jazzy Jeff too, but
yeah, and sure as heck, you look on the cover. What is he doing?
He's smiling.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It got dark so fast.
Yeah.
Thanks, DMG. I appreciate it. I'm glad you are enjoying the Stones 80s deep dive, and Undercover is where I start going dark on the Stones. Not a favorite of mine, but not terrible either. Anyway, Technotronic, Pump Up the Jam, Marine.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that was all over the radio.
Oh God, everywhere.
Yeah.
LL Cool J.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the thing too. If you were on the Deaf American label with Rick Rubin, that you were cool too. So
definitely.
But
Yeah, maybe Rick Rubin needs to produce Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden needs a new producer. You know who Rick Rubin should produce? He should produce a Paul McCartney record, because I love what Rick did with Johnny Cash.
Ooh.
I think he could do the same with Paul McCartney. Like, dude, we want to hear Paul with just his guitar or just piano and vocals. I think Rick Rubin could do a kick-ass job with a
Heck
Paul
yeah.
McCartney.
Yeah, I would love that. I don't know if Paul's ego would necessarily gel with
Well,
Rick
I mean,
Rubin.
they did Let It Be Naked, where they stripped a lot of that stuff away, and I feel like let's just strip all that nonsense away and get Paul down to just him and his guitar or him and a piano, click record, and see what happens.
Yeah, that would be great. Right.
I don't know.
What was TLC, Brandon?
I think I remember Left Eye talking about that one time, where she was saying like they consider themselves a hip hop group, but they didn't want to be so traditional to what hip hop was at the time, which I think is why it is hard to place them, because they can sound so R&B and dance-ish sometimes. But they thought of themselves as a different kind of hip hop group.
Yeah.
Oh. All right, guys. Well, this was fun discussion to have. For the 5 people who watched, thank you.
Yeah, I feel like when Josh and Aaron and Gary are on, more people are commenting.
I got the feeling it's an anti-ball thing.
Yeah, maybe.
It might be. People they want hair in their live streams, but I forgot to read Gary's picks.
Oh.
No, just kidding. I don't have any, but I know that's what he was probably afraid of when he said he wasn't showing up tonight. But
You know what we should have did, Jeff? We don't have probably time for it now. We should have grilled Chris on his picks from last week. Because remember, none of us knew a freaking thing.
And I'm bad. I didn't watch the video from last week. So did you guys make picks for me?
I did.
Oh,
I did.
Yeah. I'm a bad friend. I didn't watch the video last week.
Yeah. Well, if you lost subscribers, that's the reason why.
Now I'm gonna watch that. I got to see what these picks were.
It was kind of cool because there was so many of them that none of us knew. We were like I wish he was here to tell us about this. We have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a hint. I'll give you one of them. Lizzo was one of your picks.
No clue.
Oh, you know.
Lizzo. Now I got to watch that video.
Yes, you do. We had some fun at your expense.
That was good.
Anyway, thanks everybody by everybody, I mean, thanks all 3 of you for watching.
Yeah.
All of you, Maureen, thank you. Christian, thank you. DMG, thank you. Love you guys. Maybe it's the Grammys tonight or something. I don't know. But anyway,